Hello, and welcome to Open Wounds Podcast. I'm your host, Candice. This podcast is about healing the wounds that you can't see and leading a revolution against oppressive systems that keep them open. We're going to talk about really practical tools for managing complex PTSD, as well as dive into relevant current day topics that make healing a daily practice. You can follow us at IG at Open Wounds Podcast or watch on YouTube at Open Wounds Podcast. Please rate, review, like, subscribe, all the things, and enjoy this week's episode. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Open Wounds Podcast. This week, I have with me a guest. Her name is Fatima Khadijah. I believe I'm saying it sort of correctly. Welcome to the podcast, Fatima.
Thanks so much, Candice, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here to have this conversation.
Yeah, I reached out to Fatima because she posted this really cool infographic about the matriarchy and what the matriarchy's true purpose is and its intention. And I was like, oh, I've been wanting to talk about this. I've been excited about this topic. I've been feeling it kind of boiling internally. But I know you also have a nonprofit that you operate. So do you want to give everybody kind of a introduction to your work and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, so I'm like a Jill of all trades in many ways. I try, in this present moment, what I am trying to do most is taking the things that are collapsing and almost like a vulture getting food for their children. At the end of when something is kind of not dying, but it's on its last legs, and then using that to create new ecosystems of joy and resilience and hope and belonging. So sometimes I call myself an alchemist. I'm because I have a church entity. I like to think of myself as a liberation cleric, but I reserve the right to change my mind at any time. So
Yes.
in case something more accurate fits in the future. So.
That's really, and I will say when I first looked at your stuff, I was like, oh, a church. I was like, I don't know about this. But then I looked more, I was like, oh, okay, this is not what you normally think of as a church. So you've created something that's very unique and that I honestly haven't seen before with that.
Yeah, it was kind of like a way to be able to do a lot of different things. Like churches have the best protection in this political climate. And I am big in mutual aid work. I'm big into trying to reallocate resources to people that need them the most, and with some psychedelic therapy training and kind of other adjacent desires, I felt really called to be able to do something that was completely different, like a church of no church or a radical anarchist church, or just what Jesus would actually do if he was here. Like that's what I try to do is if he came back and he was like, I'm out, tap me on my shoulder, what would I do? And I would use the things that I have access to bring people towards liberatory, personal and collective liberation things. Cause I think that was his message and they didn't like it. So they didn't, but I'm not even a Christian. So, but church is the best word.
Yeah. The church is the best, government protection that you can have basically to not, it gives you a lot of freedom, I'll say, in a lot of venues if you want to work in. I feel like you hit on so many things. The Jesus thing is one of the topics my friends and I like to get into because we, most of us in my little family friend group were raised evangelical or non-denominational or Baptist or whatever you want to call it. And we have left that faith tradition, if you will, because what we saw was the entire, church of Christianity being co-opted by MAGA and the alt-right and all these political things, which, now my knowledge is this was something that was started back long ago and it was just building momentum. And now we're seeing it the fullness of it. But we always talk about how Jesus was kind of an anti-establishment guy. he was turning over the tables in the temple, and he was fighting with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and he was protecting the prostitute and the people that were kind of outcasts. And so I'm very passionate about that when people try to come towards me and talk about these things, because if they actually read Jesus's teachings and Jesus's messaging, it is not at all what we're seeing the way Christians behave. Jesus fed the 5,000 because he was like a socialist. It's not because he was taking
Yeah.
people's food stamps away, kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I totally resonate on that topic. Um, and I think people have misinterpreted his words in so many ways and really misinterpreted his message. So I'm really excited that you and I are kind of like vibrating in that same way.
Yeah. I think, my wall behind me is a Jesus meme wall, or like I mean, Jesus, it's like it's my birthday, or,
Yeah.
I, because my, I think he would have been a cool guy to hang out with. I don't think he would, and not just cool, I think he would have imparted wisdom without even,
Mhm.
because he embodied it.
Yeah.
And when you put the Jesus story in a liberatory framework, I think you can see that he was trying to, there's a TikTok video out there where it's like, repeat after me. I
Oh, I
am the
saw
way,
that
the
one the
truth.
other day and
Yeah,
I was like, yes, this is what I'm talking
yeah.
about.
Like, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And then they say, you are the way, the truth, and the life. No, 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 no. It's all of
I
us.
am.
We are
Yeah.
all, inside our bodies is the architecture for our own liberation and our collective liberation. And he embodied it. He was a perfect embodiment of that. And that's what made him so dangerous. They wouldn't, he
Yeah.
was a dangerous guy because his ideas were so big,
Yes.
you know?
Yes, I agree, and I think we can see that kind of pattern repeated where we have Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or these people who come in and they're disruptors and they're bringing a similar message of like freedom, liberation, collective unity and all those things. And then the systems, the oppressive systems that are in power take them out. Right. And so,
Mhm.
um, I think the other thing that you were talking about at the beginning that I really wanted to kind of deep dive in with you is the collapse that we're seeing now of the patriarchy and capitalism. And I'm going to keep saying that until it's actually real because I'm like, let's do this. Um, I think it's been a personal struggle for me right now to not get really depressed and not get really sad
Mhm.
and not get really downtrodden because I'm seeing these oppressive systems just running rampant and unchecked and there's no accountability. So I feel like when we're talking about what comes next after the collapse of capitalism, after the collapse of the patriarchy, it's naturally like this socialist Marxist matriarchy, right? Like a woman led society. And so I know that you have much more knowledge than I do about this. I'm just starting to learn about that. So could you kind of
Mhm.
give the listeners or the viewers like what exactly is matriarchy? What has it looked like when it's been in work in other societies, and what could it possibly look like going forward?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the thing that first opened me up to this potential idea. And it was in the Pachama tradition. They
Mhm.
had a long-standing prophecy for thousands of years, and other indigenous communities have also had this prophecy. It basically is the eagle and the condor. And the eagle is the masculine, the mind, the north, of the world. And
Mhm.
then the condor is the feminine, the south, and the heart. And they
Mhm.
had this prophecy for a very long time that there would come a period that was 500 years long, or approximately 500 years long, where the eagle and the condor would separate and fly into different skies.
Mm.
So, the heart and the mind would separate so that they could learn themselves better, almost in separate things. And then there would be an opportunity. And I highlight the word opportunity,
Mhm.
after that 500 years, which from 1492 would have been 1992. And Fern Gully came out in 1992. And I think that's a pretty good indication that, we were onto something. We were
Yeah.
trying to right the wrongs. And so then there would be an opportunity to fly in the same skies again and learn from each other
Mm.
again. And so I really see that as like the foundational understanding for how I got here. Because once I heard about that, I was like, oh, that's my North Star. Like
Right.
I can just keep working towards that. And then as far as I almost want to mention like with the depressive state of things, I was fortunate and unfortunate at the same time 10 years ago to have a complete and utter mental breakdown. Just
Mm,
obliterated. Like, I think I broke my brain so that my soul could remain intact. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I didn't do it consciously, but I was like,
Yeah.
this has to break because if this breaks, I can never get this back. Or it would take
Right.
a lot more repair. So I had a full-blown mental breakdown, and then what happened is that everything collapsed in my life.
Yeah.
Everything crumbled. I didn't have a job, a car, a license, a place to stay. I had to move home with my
Mm,
dad at 30. Like, that collapse taught me so much about what we're going through right now,
yeah.
and because of that, I can see, like, the Jenga tower, like,
Mhm.
every time we take a thing and put it on top, like the AI bubble or the dollar losing um, value overall. Like I can see that putting things up at the top on the Jenga tower and I see the foundation shifting. So basically,
Yeah.
what I'm doing is I'm taking all those pieces of the Jenga tower and I'm placing them in a new world that we're
Mm,
concurrently building with this one. And that one is a matriarchal society that is I would say mostly led by Black, Indigenous people of color or women of color,
yeah.
because they have the historical understandings for it. It's in
Yes.
West Africa, it's in the Zapatistas community in Mexico, and it was the way that the native land was here
Mhm. Prior
before
to colonization. Yeah.
prior to colonization. So they still carry the memory both in their resilience and in their resistance and in their blood and traditions. And so what I know about it is has been primarily from opening up to that wisdom. And so like I would definitely wouldn't consider myself an expert. I'm just a very curious person. And I'm always kind of looking at how alternative ways of being can be introduced into the mainstream, for lack of better words.
Yeah. I think that's so important because especially with this heaviness that we're experiencing, we can get like very easily stuck in it. It can be, like you said, you use the word opportunity. This is like an opportunity, and it can go two ways. We can go into
Mhm.
crazy fascism, like we saw with, Hitler and all that stuff, or it can be as it's falling apart, as the Jenga tower is crumbling. What are we going to rebuild? And I think that's why it's so important for us as small communities and as groups to talk about vision casting for what it is that we want to rebuild and kind of take control of it, because we're at a tipping point where it very easily could go one way or the other. And if we get downtrodden and we get just in despair, we won't be using our energy to create something new and better out of it, right? And so with the matriarchy, like you were saying, like Pachamama and all those other indigenous traditions, it also kind of ties back into like the land back movement that so many
Mhm.
of the Native Americans and the Native Canadians and all those other people are talking about. It's like they want their sovereignty, they want to govern the land. And I feel like that is an absolute perfect pairing for the matriarchy, right? Like they are totally in unity in how they would govern, and that it would be beneficial for all of us. I think what I hear when I talk about the matriarchy is people afraid that the matriarchy is just the patriarchy inverse, like the Barbie movie, right?
Yeah.
Like girls are in control and they're running it, but they're mean and they're kicking the guys out, and that they're not
But
included in this. And so can you talk about how that's not what the matriarchy is?
yeah, so it's interesting because Ken was better off at the end when he realized he was Knuff and didn't need a Barbie
Yeah.
to validate him. And
Yeah.
so if women are used as validation dolls, for lack of a
Mhm.
better word, for some men,
Yeah.
then like then what would the inverse be? But the inverse is actually like land and nature, it's a circle. So if patriarchy is a pyramid, which I think it's like a pyramid scheme because
Yeah,
there's so much stuff that happens where the men on the top, the mostly, white, rich, land owning, business owning, corporate white men are at the top, and then everyone goes down after that, and then
yeah,
women, children, and then nature's at the bottom. But in
yeah,
the matriarchy, it's a circle, and
right.
the nature is in the center, and then children are next, I believe, and then women. uh, It's like it's nature, community. I'm seeing it and I'm second guessing it, but nature and land is at the center.
The center,
Um,
yeah,
I don't even think it goes out in like layers like that. It's just like nature and land is at the center and then the community is around it. And you
yeah,
protect the children in the community um, because you have women there reprimanding, for lack of a better word, if if the men overstep their boundaries. And the best example of this is in bonobos, which are um, our most similar relative
genetically similar.
besides chimpanzees. And I love I mean, they're living the life. They get to eat all day, or do other things that are adult consensual things.
Yes.
And then there's only one murder ever recorded in a bonobo like group. And that was very, 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 very recently.
Yeah, I
And that
just
was
did a little
because
post about that because I was like, wait, they've been studying these bonobos for like 35 something odd years, a long time. And just like in the last 2 weeks, did this happen where the bonobo females, it was a male bonobo tried to kill a baby bonobo. And so they jumped him and they him. And so, I jokingly, like, I told my husband and my sons, I was like, "Listen to the bonobos." But, yeah, I think that, like you're saying, they're an example of what a matriarchy looks like. The nature's at the center, and we also see that with the Native American tribes so often, is that the children and nature are at the center, and they are the highly like, the most valuable thing in the society, and then everything else works around to support that, right?
Yeah, that's exactly, how I see it, how I envision it, how it's been presented to me, and it makes sense because, this it's very interesting that when I had my mental breakdown 10 years ago, I was I had never really known what it meant to trust my gut. Like, when
Mm,
people said that, I was like, "I have a head and I have a heart. I don't know what my gut is saying."
yeah.
I just had no clue. And I can almost assume that other people might have had that same similar thing, or like they couldn't really tell when their gut was speaking. And
Mhm.
so I do find it fascinating that during that breakdown, which was also the best thing that ever happened to me because it completely obliterated the unsafe or the like a poor structure that was built on shoddy foundations so
Mm,
that I could relay the foundation in the future. And so it was fascinating that like my grandfather and my aunt who passed away, and I had a little brother that passed away, and they came to me during that time, which
mm,
was a spiritual awakening and a mental breakdown at the same time, paradoxically true.
yeah.
And then I named my business that I started 10 years ago after it was Mose, Mary, and Me, and I named it after my grandpa and my aunt. Um, and they were whatever they were saying to me, whispering to me was coming through my gut, and then
Mm,
the more I trusted that, the more this connection was strengthened with my ancestors, which is hard to do in a white body because white
yes,
bodies are kind of, uh uh we are told to numb. We are
yes.
told always to numb. And so I think the best thing, like if somebody was like wanted to know today what they could do, like to work towards this future, like work on feeling your feelings and alchemizing like your rage and your grief into something new because we all have ancestors
Yeah.
that that I think can guide us in the way that the indigenous communities guided, which is as people conditioned under whiteness to be considered white. I think a lot gets stolen from us and we don't focus on that as much.
Mhm.
And I think once we learn the lessons of our ancestors, I think we, like us as white women, will be able to um, operate within the matriarchy in a way that honors the things that the matriarchy does honor, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you bring up a good point because this actually, I was at the hairdresser getting my hair cut and stuff. And in the Hawaiian culture, when they do perform hula, they do, I think it's called olelo, where they learn a chant and they practice the chant. And it's like woven in with the dance. It's not just dancing. They're telling a story, right? Through the verbiage. And it was a younger gay white guy and he was like, "It's asking me in the Ololo to talk to my ancestors and to summon my ancestors and bring them in to this and for them to support me." And he's like, "And fuck my ancestors because I'm a gay white man and they would have, wanted to murder me. They would have never allowed me to exist." And I felt very similarly when I started to learn about the Hawaiian culture and then their use of their ancestors as support because I was like, my ancestors were freaking slave owners. My ancestors were garbage people. Like they colonized this nation. Why would I want to have anything to do with them? But I think that's something that we have to work through as white people with our ancestors because we, especially if we're doing any of this work, if we're doing any social justice or activism or trying to be better people, we look back at our generations and we're like, fuck them. But what I'm learning more about like spirituality and, when people's energy leaves this plane and goes into another plane is like there is a learning that, what they did in this realm, like let's say your great
Mhm.
grandpa, what he did when he was here on the earth, he may have regrets about that. He may have learned something from that. And he may want to tell you, "Hey, I have regrets about this. I have learned these things and this is what I want to share with you." So I know that that's a big part of us as white people learning about our ancestors because we have such a resistance towards it in general.
I think that's such an interesting and good point that, um, that is a good reminder of how I felt. Like, full disclosure, I mean, I'm mostly German,
Me too.
and, my mom just told me that, like, when I was younger, she was like, "Yeah, our family, on my side, uh, made cars in Germany," and I was like, "Cool, we made cars, we made them for the Nazi party."
Yeah.
So, like, I don't I don't her side is not the side I commune with the most
Mm,
because, I haven't been contacted by anybody on that side beside
yeah.
I occasionally my grandmother on her side who had some, um, Cherokee in her, like, will come through, but very seldom, and most of it has been and this is where I kind of think it's an interesting fact, like, my other side of the family, my dad's side of the family was German, but they were Amish, and
Mm,
so they were caretakers of the land.
right.
Not dissimilar from I guess they have their own religious whatever's going on,
Right.
but and they have their own like, I saw within the church ways that people, took power and control over things, but the day-to-day of my grandfather's life was a farmer. He was with the
Mhm.
land, he knew the land,
Yeah.
and the an interesting little thing that I recall, he we had a lot of arrowheads that were on the land, and he
Mhm.
collected and encased all of them.
Oh,
He,
cool.
like, really treasured,
Mhm.
like and you're not supposed to dig them up is what I learned later on, but I don't think he knew
At
that,
the
and I
time
think
he
he
knew, yeah,
really
he didn't know that, and
yeah,
he was gonna dig to put plants in the ground anyway, so yeah.
yeah, yeah, and then he had, like he was Amish, and he was, like, a Sunday school teacher who would be like, "What about the dinosaurs, though?" So, like, he was a
Yeah.
little bit of a rebel, and I've clearly descended from that cloth, uh but yeah, he had, never finished past 8th grade, but had National Geographics from every year from like, you know, for
Mhm.
his entire adult life. And so I think I'm very fortunate that I had him as a guide and he's still like I still feel like I have a picture of him right up here. He looks over me, my aunt is over here. And
Mhm.
and I know it's hard because we're still kind of on this plane of reality, still seeing our ancestors through like the zeitgeist of what they experienced in their lifetime. But
Mhm.
they do learn and they do um and like even just putting like a picture up by a candle, like
Yeah.
it'll be like like the tiniest, and the more you allow yourself to like look for it or be open to it, the more they'll commune. And I know that's not the original point of this
Yeah.
talk, but I do think it's important because I think that there's so much wisdom that we as white people, and specifically German white people, like everything was separating and ordering, separating and ordering, separating and ordering. And the universe is one, like the earth is one organism. We are
Yeah.
little organisms on the bigger organism. It works in tandem with each other. Like you see it like in the mycelial network that
Yeah.
connects like the mushrooms and the trees underground. Like
Mhm.
that that can exist in this above ground too, um, in its own way. But we're just so conditioned to numb ourselves from our trauma,
Yeah.
um, and our collective trauma and the trauma that happened in Europe,
Yeah.
um, during the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, because
Mhm.
that was unresolved and people were fleeing Europe because of the for like, raping, pillaging.
Right.
They were fleeing that and they came to the US and then they unknowingly, and I think it was unknowing, like embedded that trauma onto the Black and Indigenous people that,
Yeah.
we brought here. And so I think the first thing that, one thing that we can do is look at what happened during that time and try to process that generational trauma in the bodies that we're in now.
Yeah. There's a lot of scientific research now showing, especially through the matriarchal line, that those genetic, like, things get passed down through, like, your grandma to you and all those things, and so a lot of times we need to do some somatic work because like you were
Mhm.
saying, there is very much, especially with white people, this separation. My mind is in charge of everything and we need to tell all this other stuff to be quiet because it's illogical and it's not rational, right? But once you're able to kind of work to get them together, to
Mhm.
communicating, a lot of stuff, what I've noticed, will just come up in my body. Like I'll be trying to record a freaking short and I'm like, "Okay, I gotta do my tapping. I gotta do some breathing. I gotta get up and move because my body, it may be trauma from my grandma, it may be trauma from someone else in my lineage of fear of speaking up, or it may be my own trauma from my own life, but processing it in our bodies is, again, I mean, this whole podcast started for people who have complex PTSD. It's very common for us to have bodily reactions and be overriding, like you said, our gut or our inner knowing. And that does, I think, tie into the matriarchy because so much of what we see with the patriarchy is like, it has to be logical, it has to be masculine, it has to be like mentally focused and kind of controlled, versus the matriarchy, it's more fluid, it's more in tune with the cycles of our bodies, like our sleeping and waking and our hormonal cycles, and
Mhm.
it's much more fluid and it's much more, you know, like, I guess natural is what I would call it, versus the masculine tends to be very, rigid and, lacking flexibility in that we always work and we always show up and it's 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, 52 weeks out of the year, versus the matriarchy is more like, okay, well, it's winter. So maybe we don't need to be like grinding it out all day. And then we'll do a little bit more in the summer. And I think, that's something too, when we're doing our own internal work, giving ourselves that breathing room and the flexibility and the opportunity to kind of just, if I'm having a bad day, don't force it, right? Or if I'm having a really good day, let's
Mhm.
optimize it kind of.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the somatic understanding and the like embodying the work or the therapy or the somatics of it is like the cornerstone. Like
Mhm.
it really is. And um I everything you said was just, I was like, yes, yes, yes. I really agree. And you know, like I try to not like hide away or shy away from like the mental health stuff that happened because like I have a bipolar 1 diagnosis. That's great. That's someone else's opinion of
Right.
or, a DSM's book, but what are the
Right.
experts? They are categorizing and ordering people
Yeah.
into little boxes, and if I was around 500 years ago in an indigenous community, I would have been a shaman. That's
Yeah.
just like, and
And
I don't
part
think
of it
that.
is because of
Yeah.
capitalism, because of the insurance, because they gotta
Mhm.
get paid for the work they do, and a lot like, yeah, I've had many therapists be like, "I have to give you a diagnosis so that I can bill your insurance company," but it's really irrelevant when we're doing the inner work and you know what I mean, the healing that goes on. It's like you said, categorize, criteria, and it goes back to capitalism, and it goes back to patriarchy.
Exactly. It go and it's that the patriarchy has shown very recently and to such a degree and an exception that like, and this is like a hot take, but pedophilia is unchecked patriarchy. Like
Absolutely.
that's the
That's the
reality
root
of
of
what
it.
happens when you put men at the top and children and nature at the bottom. Like
Yeah.
that's what happens. It is, and then you think about all the trauma that gets created from
Mhm.
young people being subjected to being oppressed and used for the same way that capitalism uses nature and the land for its
Yeah.
own greedy desires.
Yeah.
There needs to be like you said something in the beginning about there's no checks and balances. Like it's not going to come, I don't think, in this system. I mean, maybe it will.
No.
Maybe I'm Thomas Massey and some of the other people in Congress that are really focused on finding resolution for the victims, and the victims are all incredibly brave and powerful
Yeah.
and really like, but we are here because when things stack on top of each other that are built on a shoddy foundation, they're going to collapse. And so for me, it's not even just a matter of like in my mind, the patriarchy's already collapsed. Like
Yeah.
I
Which
I
I think
operate.
is a great way we should be operating from, because that way, if you believe in manifestation or metaphysics or any of that stuff, it's like we are creating our reality, right? And so for so long, we've been allowing these capitalist elite pedophiles to create the reality. And we're just kind of like, I have no control. I have no control. But I think part of the matriarchy is taking back our control as women,
Mhm,
especially as indigenous or black, other cultures, taking back their power and stopping. Like my husband and I were talking about this. We have a lot of people who come here to Hawaii from the Marshall Islands and Micronesia because we bombed them and we destroyed their land because of capitalism and the military industrial complex. But they tend to have this attitude of like, oh, well, nothing I can do. And that, I think, is where capitalism and the patriarchy wants us. They want us to
mhm.
be complacent. They want us to give up. They want us to be despondent so that we don't take action, so that we don't take our autonomy back and we don't take control of what is happening and what's creating. And you mentioned something about the patriarchy being pedophilia, and that ties so much back into the matriarchy, is because if we devalue children and they have no rights, and we devalue the land and it's not protected, then, everything, like you said, it's corrupt from the foundation upward, and it just keeps
Mhm.
feeding on itself in this really destructive pattern where the matriarchy instead values the children, which is our future, values the land, which creates growth and stability and strength, right?
Absolutely. There's a I'm my brain kind of works in like pictures and images and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And there was a YouTube video of, I think it's uh titled like the tribe that will save the world, and
Mm.
they are in Colombia, I believe, and they are a culture that like recognizes that like earth is the first mother,
Mhm.
and they call us who live in the civilized world their little brothers, and they consider
Mm.
themselves like the eldest brothers because they've carried the wisdom from the time before the 1492
Yeah.
colonial pillaging.
Mhm.
They carry that lineage, and they are waiting for us to come to these spaces so they can teach us how to commune with the land again.
Mm.
And it's like, because I maybe I seek out a lot of the stuff of, like, the world that I wanna see or the world I wanna build, or I dream about it and I envision it, it feels real to me, like,
Yeah.
in a way that, like, that, like, is it Martin Luther King or that you take the first step, like, even if you can't see the whole staircase? That's
Yeah.
why I have my hands in so many different pots, like, if capitalism isn't working, how can I operate doing mutual aid, creating, like, a tool library, doing things in community gardens and all of that? How can I do that now and do it in a sustainable structure that makes it so if the collapse continues, which I believe wholeheartedly that it will,
Yeah.
I have like a soft place to land that I've already kind of put the groundwork in now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think that's so important because I was talking to my son the other day and he was like, "Well, I don't want to do this and I want to do that." And I was like, "Well, by law, you don't have the right because you're a minor in the United States of America and children have zero rights." Like I had another episode talking with the I think she's the CEO of the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, but basically we were talking about child's rights. There are no children's rights and children are basically treated, right at the same as we do animals in our culture. And so, I think the other thing too, and I'd love to like kind of hear your thoughts and information on this is like what I hear when men are talking is a lot of fear that if the patriarchy collapses and capitalism collapses, that they will be treated poorly and that their quality of living will be poor. And that's why they don't want it to happen. And I'm trying to tell them, you have no, like, that's all wrong because the way the patriarchy is actively harming men, the patriarchy is actively hurting little boys and adolescent boys and men. And if all these structures were removed, everyone would be better for it. Like the matriarchy benefits the land, children, women, and men. Even though men don't get to be controlling and hurting everyone, you are better for it in the end, right?
yeah. I on my phone in the past week, I came across like a photo of I think it was like uh he was a chief. I can't remember his name, but he was my brain says two elk.
Uh,
I don't know if that's correct. But he was saying that he knew the white man, and the white man is a representation of all these things. The white man came and they said, "We have a better system than you have." He was like, "But he doesn't the white man doesn't realize that the women lead and are in charge and do most of the work. The children are taken care of. The land is honored and treated like an ancestor. And the
mhm.
men go out and hunt all day and come home and have sex. And only a white man thinks that they could create a better system than that."
Right.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, and I know in modern terms that might be a little bit different, but like at the same time, it's like m- m- the pressure that gets put on men to perform well in a patriarchy is
Yeah.
it's unsustainable, it's unfair, it's unrealistic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Whether or not, like, I don't think they even have, like, it's unrealistic. Like, you in a
Yeah.
matriarchy, men are generally just chilling. Like, they get to eat and hunt and have sex all day. Like, not
Yeah.
all day, but, like, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, that's the bonobos do. They don't hunt,
Right.
but, they eat and they copulate. That's a much better
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
Um, I was like, "Don't say it, don't say it." And then it's
Yeah.
just like but, like, they copulate, and not that that's, like, in abundance, but when women feel safe, when
Mhm.
women feel secure and safe, it is so much easier to enjoy that. In an
Yeah.
environment like we're in now, it is so hard to feel safe, like, when you're establishing, like, a new I'm single, but I'm, like, happily single, where you're like,
Yeah.
"I don't know, I might have dodged a couple of bullets there."
Yeah.
from some of the ones that I was like, this has got to work out. Um, but I just think that men have such a misnomer. Like,
Mhm.
I want them to take the pressure of the weight of the world off their backs too, because it
Mhm.
should be shared. And women have the capacity to multitask in a way that like is just not inherent. Or like, I try not to do like complete binaries, but women take care of everyone better.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you let them take care of you better? Or
Yeah.
like take care of the land better or the kids better?
Mhm.
Like, this is not exactly like on whatever, but how often do you see a 16-year-old male babysitter? You don't,
Yeah.
because you don't trust them. But you trust a
Yeah.
14 to 16-year-old girl to take
Yeah.
care of your baby. Why is
Yeah.
that? And if we're
Exactly.
allowing that, why don't we allow the women that have gone through 40, 50 years um, in learning the culture to lead? Because we're the only animal, for lack of a better word, that has menopause that isn't a matriarchy. We're like
Yeah.
actually supposed to be a matriarchy. It is
Yeah.
we are a matriarchy under operating under
The oppressive
a
system of the
oppressive
patriarchy.
system of the patriarchy, which
Yeah.
and maybe the thing I told you at the beginning about the eagle and the condor, maybe we had to learn all of this. Maybe we had to get the technological minds. Maybe we did have to separate and order things in a way that pathologizes people. It's not my cup of tea, but maybe
Yeah.
that was a period of human growth that had to happen so that whatever's coming next we can work towards in a more cohesive way. I don't completely like to beat that point because I'm like there's still a lot of reparations and
Yes.
things that have to happen and land back, which is a great way to kind of they're just stewards of the land. Like the
Yeah.
indigenous people are not trying to own the
Yeah.
land, they're trying to be stewards of it. And if we were proper stewards of the land, I'm sure we wouldn't have done everything that happened.
Yeah.
So
I
sorry, I
I
get a little
think that
heated.
you brought up a couple of good points there. One was, well, let's just go with stewards of the land. We've seen all this nonsense with Greenland right now, where our dictator is trying to take over their country. And one of the things I saw was like from a Greenlander saying, "We don't own land here. The land belongs to Greenland. We are allowed to get a mortgage and put a house, and we've been given permission to put our house on the land, but the land is not owned by any person. If the land can't be owned by a corporation, it can't be owned because it is, right? And so I feel like that's a really good example of like how the land back movement and the indigenous people treated the land is its own thing. It's autonomous. We cannot own it. We cannot, possess it, so to speak. And then the other thing that I really liked that you were talking about that reminded me because of being raised in like the evangelical church where it's very much submit to the husband. The husband is the head of the household. The husband is in charge of the final decisions. He has to make the financial decisions. He has to make any big, huge life decisions. And so what I saw when I was like having relationships with men and dating in the evangelical church and when I got married, as I'm like, okay, here, you're the man. Here's all the responsibility. All I'm supposed to do is make a baby
Mhm,
and clean the house. And he's like, overwhelmed,
mhm,
stressed out. Like, that's a lot to put on one person. It is a huge amount of responsibility for another human to take where you are solely responsible for every decision, all the money, all the goings on, and like a lot of times, my husband and other men were just like freaked out by it. They didn't want it. They didn't really want
mhm,
all that authority and power. And so I was just like, well, this is what I've been indoctrinated in my entire
mhm,
life. Why isn't it working? I'm doing what they're telling me. He doesn't like it. I don't like it. Nobody's happy. And so that's such a good point. It's like the patriarchy right now has put an unfair burden on men and not now, some men like to be in control and like to be the boss and are very, assertive in that way. But I don't think it's the large majority of men. In fact, when I've worked with lots and lots and lots of people, it's usually the woman who's doing all the talking, the woman who's doing all the organizing, the woman who's making most of the decisions, the women who's, like kind of coordinating and organizing and project managing and doing all these things. And the guys just kind of like sit back and giggle and tell stories. And, so I feel like you're right. Like it's been damaging men in a way that they aren't recognizing. And they're just afraid that we're going to hurt them in the ways that they've hurt us. And that's not at all how the matriarchy would function.
Not at all. And so interesting. A couple of things that you reminded me of. There was this clip from 2020 with Eddie Glaude Jr., who is a commentator and like a public thinker. And he was saying we've this was specifically about racism, but I'm gonna mirror it over patriarchy.
Yeah.
He was saying, we keep trying to tell you, we keep trying to tell you that we like to present to you the opportunity, the um, option to free yourself from being white, which is a novel thing to hear and to say because it's like, why would I need to be free? But white people are not liberated. They're just their power over, and I'm not saying all, you know what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
Their power over instead of power coming from within. And
Hmm.
liberation is power coming from within. So, and the patriarchy works the same way. I'm like, men, I want to free you from the constraints of having to be a man. Like,
Yeah.
uh, like to be in such a strong man or, like the good man isn't even, I don't even know, that's such a subjective thing anymore. But I want to liberate men from the confines of being a man. Cause
Yeah.
that's not just because you have more power over people doesn't mean that you have more power coming from within. And the power from within is the Jesus and the Martin Luther Kings and
Hmm.
the Malcolm X's who said specifically, when you raise Black women, you raise everyone else in society because they're at the bottom and everyone else comes up with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know exactly how to translate it to men, but I'm
Yeah.
like, no,
I sit here
bonobos?
and I'm like, how do they not get it? Because, like, I'm going to use an example that just came out this week. There was in Minnesota a big ice sculpture in front of one of the buildings, the government buildings, and I can't remember if it said protect or something. It had a big ice sculpture, and there was this guy. I don't know if he was an ICE agent or if he's just some person, but he came and he was wearing like all camo and a vest, and he like is like kicking down the ice sculpture, and he's trying to express what we are brainwashed as masculinity. Like, I'm going to beat stuff up and I'm going to be aggressive and I'm going to show people who's boss. But his body, and it's kind of sad. Like, this is the part where I'm like, we as liberals need to be a little bit more empathetic and compassionate when we're doing these things. We can have the discussion without humiliating people, but they were humiliating and mocking him because his bodily movements were not masculine enough. He was like, his core strength wasn't engaged, and the way he was kicking, his arms were kind of going out like a dancer would, right? And so they, like, I can see, like, we're using the patriarchy as liberals
Mhm.
to shame a man because we don't like that he's being too MAGA, right? And now I'm like, do you guys not see you're being the same as he is? Like, you are inflicting upon him the same thing he's trying to inflict. And I'm just like, oh, it makes me so upset. Like, I get, like, yeah, he's being an idiot. What he was doing, he was trying to be macho or whatever. He was trying to, be a disturber or what. I'm not thinking of the right word right now. But I just, and it was when, I guess it's the guy, the politician in Florida that's really short, and he always wears like cowboy boots. And they keep humiliating him over his height. And I'm like, that's the patriarchy right
Yeah.
there. You humiliating a man that he's not tall enough, then that makes him a baby or not manly enough. That's the patriarchy, right? Like, so it's this weird, vicious cycle that just feeds in upon itself, where instead of saying, like, hey, I don't agree with his politics, he's damaging our society. This is bad for children. This is bad for women. This is bad for men. Instead, we take the patriarchy and we like weaponize it and hurt men with it. And so that's one of the things I'm like, how do you not get that you are fucking yourself over, right? Like
Yeah.
the patriarchy's hurting you too, even when you are in power, right? It just makes
It's
me like bonkers.
I know you have a son, but have you seen K-pop Demon Hunter?
Yeah, we watch it all the time.
Good, good, good. I just wanted to make sure that I mean, if anyone listening hasn't seen it, I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
But shame is the engine
Yes.
for the like, shame is the engine, and I know that, like, it was shown as, like, a big demon thing, but that shame, unresolved shame, it's not guilt. White people don't have white guilt because most of us in this generation have not done a lot of massive things that are guilt inducing, but
Right.
we have embedded intergenerational shame. And
Yes.
so I think, like, for me, any kind of thing that is like dehumanizing language in any capacity towards anyone,
Mhm.
um, I think is steals from your own humanity. And I think
Yeah.
anytime we shame someone, whether it be someone's height or if they're not masculine enough, it's like we're actually mirroring our own insecurities and our own fears onto
Yes.
them because shame is the engine that capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, and colonialism works. Like shame is the only,
Yeah.
it is actually the underbed of the currency. Like, because if, like it is, which is why I think it's a shoddy foundation. Like, I think it will absolutely collapse because people like the entire beauty industry is you're not good enough. You have
Mhm.
wrinkles. Go get Botox, get this expensive makeup, do this thing. And that's for women. And men have their own version of like a man would have DeWalt. Like he
Yeah.
wouldn't have anything but DeWalt
Yeah.
power tools. It
Yeah.
is the shame around if I'm not a good enough woman or if I'm not a good enough man or if I'm not a pretty enough or strong enough man, like that shame is the secret thing and it's the elephant in the room
Yeah.
in the United States and all over the world to some degree that like keeps the systems of power in place. Like I truly think the best thing that we can do is like I think I've said that a lot. There's a lot of things we can do, but looking at our own shame, looking at our intergenerational shame, the shame that our parents didn't mention or didn't talk about or didn't feel comfortable addressing, the shame we feel for having colonizers as ancestors, like
Yeah.
the shame, if that can be alchemized, and I think alchemize is like such a integral word. It is literally taking the sickness that caused you to feel shame and turning it into medicine.
Yeah.
And it's not like something that I think I think we have like if that's the case, then all of the ills of this world can be alchemized into a form of medicine as long as we kind of agree with one another that we're not going to use dehumanizing languages and we're not going to shame someone else because we know it's the elephant in the room of our own lives.
Yeah, so shame is one of those tools that capitalism and the patriarchy uses to enforce us to like, behave and operate within the narrow confines, right? That we our gender roles and all those other things. So, um I'm just wondering like as we're seeing all this stuff coming out right now and we're not seeing any accountability and we're not seeing any like our government isn't, you know, doing anything basically as because you are basically like a community organizer is what I'd see you as with your church and the work you do. Is there ways people can connect with either your work or other people locally to kind of rally together to try to start implementing these concepts?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different things. Like I have on my I am Fatima Khadijah Instagram. I have like a weird like because there's so many different parts of my brain, I have like different outlets for different things. But I have my I am Fatima Khadijah Instagram. And then on that is a channel that you can join called Building the Next World.
Mm,
And so we've been gathering people. We had the first call that we had was just maybe a month ago, and that was like 22 people. And it was like such a overwhelming, like everyone was aligned. Like I think sometimes people feel isolated in certain aspects of, I mean, they want us to feel isolated, but they feel isolated.
Yeah.
But like that was a great place for me to be like, wow, there's so many other people thinking about this kind of thing that want to help build. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's been kind of hard to get more people kind of, I haven't I haven't gathered more people. I did the initial gathering and I was like, let's start from here. So it's a good reminder that I need to do that. And then the church, the universal becoming, or church, or the assembly of universal becoming, is where I'm going to try to build out. Like I'd love to be able to do this thing I call federated commons, which is basically just like a matriarchy of like not just mutual aid, but like self-sustaining and self-organizing communities that could work with other communities to share
Mm,
resources and ideas, but not
yeah.
necessarily have an overarching hierarchy of like, um, like the United States, like who
Right,
actually
right.
operates in the entire world, not just the United States. Like they influence everything everywhere. And
Yeah.
so without like imagining a world without that body is kind of what I'm hoping to do with the Assembly of Universal Becoming. And I've set it up so that like if people wanted to have like a chapter of the Universal Becoming where they are, then they could
That's really cool.
self-organize and then they would have the protections of the church. And then anybody could be a minister. And I kind of encourage everyone to be a minister and whatever they have a specialty in.
Yeah.
Because then you are there's not a hierarchy. I don't wanna be anyone's guru. It's like the last thing
Right.
I want.
Yeah.
And then
Exactly.
I want people to autonomously and in sovereignty work towards their own liberation collective with everyone else in a
Mm,
way where if we have a agriculture minister, great. Then
yeah.
they get to teach us how to till soil and all this other stuff. And then there's other people that could be ministers of whatever their specialty is. And in that way, we could use the umbrella of the church to actually bring about a widespread, I'm in the early stages of it, but that's like kind of the vision. And
That's
I
really cool because it's going back to the model of tribalism where we're small groups and we're supporting each other and we're sharing resources and we're emotionally and, whatever we can to be there for each other. And then the other thing too is like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody's in charge. Like we're all kind of in charge and we're all supporting each other. I'll link those things in the notes of the episode in case anybody wants to reach out to you. I definitely will be looking at that later on. Yeah, and so I didn't mean to cut you off. Is there more stuff you're doing or
there always is, and some stuff I'm starting to keep my mouth shut until I get things completely done because when you tell the universe your plans, they throw a lot of wrenches in your direction. But yeah, so that would just be one way that we could facilitate this kind of change locally.
Mhm.
Is with the church. And I don't think I really had anything else, but there's always something. Like, and there's always something.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what if we try this? Like, I'm like, I've after the mental breakdown I had, my association and my understanding of failure was like completely different because after you've fallen
Mm.
flat on your face and then picked yourself up and like kept moving, like it's like if you trip, at least I didn't fall flat on my face, like so
Yeah, yeah.
I try a lot of different things and I put energy into the things that flow and I kind of release the things that don't. Um and so hopefully whether it be the church or building the next community with the Federated Commons, like something gets to, and even if the idea, like someone hears an idea and they want to do their own version, like, let that
Yeah.
marinate and build your own. You don't have to give me credit. You don't have to, like, give me a shout out even, like, just, put it into action.
Yeah,
That's
I
the
think
best way to
that
start the
the
work.
fluidity and the flexibility you're talking about is gonna be necessary for us to create something new, right, from what is happening now, because when we become inflexible and we become too rigid, then it narrows our ability to do things, right? So we need to be able to say, "Okay, well, maybe in this chapter, they have these things happening, but your chapter can look differently, and it doesn't have to be
Mhm.
that way," right? Like, especially if we're looking urban versus rural or across different continents, there may
Yeah.
be different things that other locations need that other locations don't. Like right now, Minnesota and all these places where they're having all this ice activity probably has something very different that they would need than someplace like where I'm living. And so I think that's really great that you're giving kind of a skeleton, but it can be fleshed out in many different ways and connected, and the little pods or whatever you want to call them can communicate and share ideas and share
Mhm.
understanding and come together if they need to, and then not if they don't need to.
Absolutely. You nailed it. You
Yeah.
read back to me the thing, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that is a good idea." Like,
Yeah, it's
you know, 'cause
phenomenal. Yeah,
but
I
it's
I
also
actually
it's based on the way indigenous communities have self-organized. So it's definitely not anything like I could ever take credit for. Like the Black Panther Party is another example
Mhm.
of organizations that worked in that way. And I just study patterns and trends, really, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's and see what worked, see what didn't work, and learn from it, implement, change, pivot, because I think that's going to be so important for us going forward is the ability to pivot. Like, okay, that didn't work. We had a bad result. Let's change it. It's not a failure. It's a learning, like you said. We
Mhm.
not getting tied up with like, oh, this thing failed. I give up. Or it's over. No, let's change. Let's implement a new course correction kind of thing and go from there. But thank you so much, Fatima, for coming on. I love talking to you. I think this stuff is really important, and I think it's going to become more central to the topics that I have as I talk to people, because we do need to kind of constantly reframe like, yes, terrible, terrible things are happening around us all the time, but we can't stay in that. We need to like grieve it and release it and then refocus on what's next, what's next, what's next, because that's the only way we can create something new.
Yeah, and action is something that like action is the best, like whether it be in the body or moving through the body or moving from the body into art, music,
Yeah,
like community structures, like moving that stuff through the body and taking an action will make the day-to-day trenches of collapse and patriarchy and all the things much more manageable. Cause
yeah,
as crazy as it sounds, I don't think I've ever been more optimistic, and not specifically for my lifetime. I don't know what will happen within my lifetime. If I'm trying to live like Jesus, I got to make sure I don't get killed first.
yeah, yeah,
But like,
exactly.
like I'm making a lot of, I'm inspiring some people, but making a good amount of enemies from within the structures. But I say that to say, like, I can smell it. I can,
Mm,
I can feel it. I can see the sun on my skin as I'm carrying a basket of, as I've like picked some stuff from my garden in community and bring it back to
mm,
the woman in the kitchen who's starting the meal. Like I can feel it. And
yeah,
maybe it's because it's from my like deep, deep, deep in the ancestry, but also I can see it in like a solar punk Afro futurist matriarchy in the future. And
yeah.
so if you can connect to that, you're gonna be just fine, you
I
know?
feel like a lot of us are feeling that right now, like, a lot. I've seen it. It's funny, I don't know if my algorithm, like, connected to my my brain and my psychic energy or whatever, because it's just, like, all these women, different women I've never seen before, their content's coming up, and it's, like, the same thing we're talking about. It's community, it's matriarchy, it's collective, it's change. It's, like, the kind of witchy like thing happening where we need to work together as a community to overcome the evil that's currently present. And so you're not the only one feeling it. I'm feeling
Yeah.
it. I think a lot of women specifically are feeling it right now, where it's just kind of like we're at a tipping point, and it's exciting because we can finally see like another future is possible, another future where everyone's being protected and cared for is possible. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to link all your stuff in the show notes. I'm going to try to find some of the things that you talked about and also link those in case people want to go down little rabbit trails. And
Mhm.
and I appreciate you sharing your time with us today. And thank you everybody for listening and watching. Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
It was an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate you having me on. It's
All
great.
right. Thank you everyone for listening, and have a good week.